This is Deborah Johnson for Women at Halftime, and I'm passionate about helping women use their untapped skills, resources, and talents to create their ideal work and lifestyle, making a difference in their second half. Well, it is so good to be back with you today on our Women at Halftime podcast. And I have a delightful guest. I'm so excited to have her. And we're talking all about starting a SaaS business. We're going to talk about that to help the justice crisis. And I have with me Dorna Moini. And Dorna, thanks so much for being here. It's just great to have you. It's just great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Debbie.
Yeah, it's just a lot of fun. So anyway, but I'm going to, a couple announcements before we get going. Make sure everyone can connect with me on social media. And on Facebook, you can always find me. I'm just doing these 5-day challenges now and then. If you look on Facebook, it's Deborah.Johnson, and you can find all of those there. And if you've missed one, you can always click into a past one. Also on Instagram, Deborah_Johnson Works. So that's Deborah_Johnson Works. And I also have a fairly new music one, Deborah_Johnson Music. So you can find me there. So plenty of things always ahead. So anyway, let me introduce Dorna just a little bit. I met Dorna not that long ago, but I was so impressed by what you are doing because you are a woman-owned business and really have this kind of a startup, but you're an attorney. And you've been a trial lawyer, and you've defended all these companies in class actions, trade secret cases. It just sounds very fascinating, doesn't it? And high stakes whistleblower and harassment cases. And I'm always very intrigued by some of these because of the amount of hacking and everything that's going on these days and all of that. And so, I mean, you've been an attorney, but you found that part of your income, a lot of it was developing this new software that you have put out, and we're going to talk about that. And also, I thought this was very interesting. I found on one of your bios that you speak English, French, and Persian. Is that correct?
I do.
So, yeah, Dorna's a smart cookie. Okay, so she. But you have started your company as a self-help legal, and we'll get into that. What a no-code software is. But tell me just a little bit, tell our listeners about your background and a little bit more of how you started this company.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you again for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So I never really thought that I was going to enter the software world. That wasn't something. I didn't study computer science. It wasn't something that was on my mind back then. One of the reasons I speak Persian is my parents are from Iran. And so I originally wanted to grow up and become a human rights attorney. And that's why I went to law school. So I went to law school, and then you realize you have a bunch of student debt that you need to pay off. So you don't always go, do your nonprofit job, the one that you wrote the law school essays about. Instead, I went and worked at a big firm. I worked there for about 7 years. But throughout that time, I always I kept working with pro bono cases. I did a lot of work on pro bono immigration cases. And then one of the areas that was really near and dear to my heart was domestic violence law. Mm. So what we would do was we would help people, victims, survivors of domestic violence to file restraining orders and get monetary and child support, other forms of relief from the court. But what I found was that a lot of those initial stages of the case were very routine and form heavy and rules based. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, why are we spending, as attorneys who we have a very high billable rate, and we should be spending our time doing the things we went to law school for. Why are we spending that on the routine forms and routine documents? So what I did was, at the time I lived in San Francisco, and in San Francisco, everyone you know is an engineer. So I got together with a friend of mine who's now my co-founder. And I basically what I wanted to do was build a TurboTax, if you will. I think most of your listeners are probably familiar with the TurboTax concept. You enter all your information at the end of the process, it gives you your tax documents. What we wanted to do was build a TurboTax, but for domestic violence survivors. So they could get onto the platform, enter their information at the end of that process, get their documents. And then maybe a lawyer needed to help them with additional things like representing them at their hearing or giving them some more fact-intensive or legal-intensive advice. But at least the routine work would have been taken care of. So that was Help Self Legal, which you mentioned. And from that, we realized that there was actually an opportunity for building a platform because we wanted to build this specific tool in multiple different areas of law that touched low and moderate income people. We didn't have the expertise though in all those areas of law. So we thought if my roadblock as an attorney had always been that I didn't have the tech experience, how about if we could bridge that gap between the legal knowledge and the tech knowledge? And that is what now the company that we have now, which is Documate. That's what Documate is. It's a no-code platform. So that means you don't need to learn how to code or be a programmer to use it. You can get on and build whatever you want, the legal application of your dreams on the platform.
Wow, what a process! And from that idea, and when did you start this again? And how long was that until you got your first your products out? The first version.
Yeah. So we launched, we started working on it in late 2017. We launched the domestic violence platform at the very beginning of 2018. And then pretty quickly thereafter, we realized that we wanted to work on the platform model rather than actually building out legal content areas. And so we launched the first iteration of Documate in late 2018. That was, it's the buggy version that we had a lot of free clients who helped us tell us what they didn't like about it. And that user testing process was really crucial and important to us. And then we went live with the self-serve, full, you can go onto our website and sign up for it in early 2019.
Good. Well, that's great advice for a startup as well, is to get that feedback and from people that are actually using the product, because you can put out stuff that just looks amazing. And, if the user base, if it's not easy, it's tough. It's tough to be able to move ahead. Well, what a process. So you're kind of a baby company here, kind of really getting going, but it's going pretty well as far as, so because you had some of the contacts too. What I liked was that you were already in that field. It was a kind of a companion field, and that you found you were right there and you had those contacts and to be able to do. So tell us a little bit about that. And then I want to talk about the access to this justice crisis, what you felt in that as well, and what some of those roadblocks were. But how were you able to even get some of your first clients, and what your base was there? Because if we have people listening that, I want to start this business, how do I even start? But you already had kind of a pool there. So talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. So we were I was working with legal aid organizations within my law practice to help them with certain pro bono cases. I would take on clients and take them through the case process. So those were some of our earliest customers, because they really had a necessity. They had a need, and they're under-resourced. They're all nonprofits, and they only have so many resources and humans and even computer power to devote to their cases. And so they were actually very open to trying new things. I guess one thing I would say to listeners out there who are looking for early users is find that customer who really needs your product, and who, if you give that to them for free, they're going to be so appreciative that they're going to give you amazing feedback. You were saying a little bit earlier, get the product out there. I wholeheartedly agree. So because Documate is a platform, we actually have a lot of clients who build their own products for their clients on Documate. And so I'm talking to a lot of our clients about this. And what I always say is start small, think big, and iterate quickly. Like, you can have a huge idea for what you want to build, but start with the smallest scope project that you can start testing. And when you get it out there, you'll get feedback and you can iterate on it and build an amazing product that, people will then start paying for and actually be begging you to use instead of the other way around.
I love that. Start small, think big, and iterate quickly. I mean, that is, you just have to do it. You got to jump in, but again, start small. I really emphasize this because if you start too big, you're just going to be overwhelmed, and it doesn't matter what sort of personality you are. You're still going to be overwhelmed with, how do you keep it going once you start the engine? All of that. So. Oh, that is just really great advice. So the access to justice crisis in the U.S., I mean, you've talked about these legal aid, the companies and all of the nonprofits. Tell us a little bit about what the justice crisis is, and so our listeners understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the justice crisis and the access to justice gap is essentially the fact that there are so many people in the United States and beyond, but I'm going to talk specifically about the United States, who don't have access to legal services for such critical needs, things that are really life or death needs, like wage theft, guardianship, the security and safety of their shelter, their ability to work, their access to healthcare, and their chances to participate in the rearing of their children. So really, really critical needs. And the reason for this is because the average person in America makes about $25 an hour. And obviously the minimum wage is even lower. The average lawyer in America is about $350 an hour, obviously higher and lower depending on whether you live in metropolitan areas. So there is a huge gap between that. There's so many people who can't afford a lawyer, but have these very critical legal needs. The Legal Services Corporation, which is a partially congressionally funded organization that doles out money to several different legal aid organizations across the country. They do a report every few years. And the last one they did, I think they're doing another one actually this year, but the last one they did in 2017, they found that 86% of people did not have their civil legal needs met. So that means they have an eviction issue, or they have a domestic violence issue, or a family law issue, and any kind of legal issue that's a civil matter, not criminal, but civil. And they didn't have adequate legal assistance to go through that process.
Okay.
So
explain civil so people understand the civil.
Yes, absolutely. So there are two types of law in terms of what kind of the penalties would be. There's civil law and there's criminal law. Criminal law is anything that you could go to jail for, basically.
Okay.
In the very short summary, but it's obviously more complex than that.
Right.
And civil law and criminal law is also between the government and you. So it's the government trying to put you in jail or trying to fine you. Whereas civil law is two people against each other. So it could be a husband and wife, or a custody battle, or a landlord and a tenant, or things like that.
Right. Okay. That's helpful, I think, as we move forward to this. So, can you approach this and how technology can help in solving that justice gap, especially with the civil area that people don't have access to?
Absolutely. So, and the reason I distinguish between those two is because criminal law, you technically have a right to counsel.
Yes, you do. Yes.
But in civil law, you don't. And that's a whole other academic discussion as to whether there should be that. But
we won't delve quite that deep.
You do 3 more podcasts on that topic. But within civil law, you could sorry, what was your question?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one, though. Your mind is moving so fast. How can technology help then in solving some of that justice gap? Because you had said, there are so many, 86% that didn't have civil legal needs met. So how can technology help us on this?
Yes. So there aren't enough attorneys to address this gap. There aren't enough attorneys, and there aren't enough pro bono attorneys who are able to, set aside their whole livelihood and the revenue side of their career to help the pro bono needs, no matter how many pro bono hours we put in. So that's why technology needs to come in and assist here, because what it can do is it can scale the work of one lawyer to many, many more people. So I'll give you an example of that. We work with a legal aid organization here in LA, and what they do is they do name and gender change forms within a clinical program. And so people will come into their clinic and they need to get a name change, and someone will help them, sit across the table from them and help them through the process and help them file their forms. They now use Documate to automate those forms. And so that allows that one person who's helping that client to 10x. In this case, we actually looked at some of their numbers. They were able to 10x the number of people they're able to serve with the same number of pro bono attorneys, because they've set up document automation, they've set up conditional logic and rules-based systems that allow them to generate these documents more quickly. And then all the attorney needs to do is review them instead of having to go through the huge set of forms that and input the information into every single one individually.
So it really truly is like a TurboTax. So you are filling out all of these areas, and then the attorney just needs to then just review it and sign off on it. So hopefully they do completely. So
exactly.
But that totally makes sense. And especially if there's a 10 time, increased rate. And for when you're talking, I'm sure many people who may be listening to this and thinking, there's not enough attorneys. There's a million attorneys out there. But attorneys, you were specific in doing, some pro bono and working with people who are especially underprivileged or they're having problems with, being able to divide kids up in a family, all of that sort of thing, care. And so those, all of those sort of forms. Now, are you creating those forms, or they create their own forms and they're able to use Documate? And what's that sort of process? That's going a little deep, but you know what I mean here.
Yeah, they create their own forms. So some of these forms are standardized forms. So family law in California, for example, is pretty standardized.
Right.
But what the legal aid organizations or the lawyers, we have a lot of lawyer clients as well. And even outside of the legal field, really anything that's a document that is template based can be automated on our system. So we don't provide the form and we don't say you have to use our form. Right. They come on and they can set the rules for their document.
That's a great thing. So, yeah. So, and you've you've already given an example of a success story. That was so great to hear, how that particular form for such as changing a name, the type of, forms that you need for those. You don't need to sit across that table from the attorney. You just need to get that form out, and they can put those out. So,
right. And one more thing I'll mention on kind of technology addressing the justice gap. It's not just about the fact that there's not enough pro bono attorneys or attorneys who are willing to do this work for free. Mm-hmm. It's also about the geographic disparity, because attorneys and even law schools who have these pro bono clinics are usually concentrated in major metropolitan areas. We're in LA, you have all the big law schools and you have lots of attorneys who are willing to provide help. But if you go out into some of the more rural areas, there aren't as many people, or if there even is a legal aid organization, you may need to drive 2 hours to get there. Right. So having the ability to access this through a mobile phone at midnight when you have like several kids and you don't want to put them into you don't want to have to pay for childcare and transportation to get to a court is actually really crucial on top of the cost issue.
And I think the timing of this is so perfect as well with the year that we have just had. I can't imagine how much your business has grown just because people have needed to do this remotely. They can't, meet. They've not been able to meet in person. And our son, that we have one son who's an attorney. So he's been able to work so much, remotely, and it will continue to be that way until their offices really open up. But it's also opened up the door to continue working remotely in many areas. So that's a really great point too about the geographic. You're kind of ahead of the curve here in really putting all of this together and what people really need, which is really great. So.
Yeah, COVID has certainly been a tipping point in technology for the legal field at the very least.
Yeah, I think every field, but I can't imagine what for the legal. It's really great. So anyway, so yeah, and he's our son, who's a tax attorney, of course, is right there in Sacramento, right in the heart of where everything is. And so, and if you needed somebody like that, and you are in an outlying area, many of those, depends on what. But that would be a specific area that you say that they would create their own software. You're not going to create that, but it would be the document platform, which is really good. And I want you to elaborate a little bit, because I understand about the no code, just because I create my websites, and I understand how nice that is not to have to use code, because I've had to use code before. And I understand what it's like when awful code gets in or you are hacked. So this is the no code technology. I want you to explain a little bit more of that in relation to, Documate and how that is created on your end.
Yeah, absolutely. So historically, the tools that have existed out there have, at least in sort of the document automation field, have fallen within two buckets. They are either very, very easy to set up, but they don't really have a lot of functionality. Maybe it's something not much more complex than mail merge. Okay. Or on the other end of the spectrum, they are very robust and they have tons of functionality. You can add all kinds of logic and calculations, but they require you to understand how to code and know Python and be able to put your quotation marks and your all the syntax in exactly the right place.
Right.
So what we do is we're kind of the best of both worlds, or really the no code field, whether that's something like Documate or whether that's something like what you built your website on. I actually remember we had this conversation. I know you don't use Webflow, which is another no code tool. I think you use the WordPress equivalent.
Yes.
So there are lots of really great no code tools in so many areas now that can be used. But what that means is you can essentially use like a drag and drop interface.
Yes.
You can click buttons. It's a toolkit.
Right.
You can tell it what you want, and they've contemplated most of the big features that you'd want, and developing everything else that they haven't contemplated already. And so that allows someone who's never gone to engineering school to be able to set up a website or to be able to set up an application on their own and maintain it, which is actually probably the more important part.
Yes, maintaining. And I tell people, because I help people, encourage people along in even developing their websites. And I use something called the Thrive themes, which I've loved because even though there are a lot of other WordPress and, from Avada themes, all of those that are out there. But this one is so much of a drag and drop, and to where you can immediately edit and you don't have to wait for, someone. I do have a team that I can have them do little tweaks, but if I want to put up another page or if I want to do some tweaks, I can do it immediately. And I can do it in the middle of the night. I can do it anytime I want, and I'm not waiting for somebody to do it. And plus, by the time you explain some of those things, it takes forever. So, you're spending twice as long. So anyway, especially on something like this. So that's that no code technology. That's and something, and people can look on your website and to see what even more of that is about, because you've really got some very informative, we'll talk about that in a minute, very informative videos on what is entailed in all of this, and how it was really, really well done. Definitely. So, and how is no code accelerating the speed as with, new software is built? I mean, how do you think that's accelerating what you are doing, the no code?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the attorneys on our platform would not be able to build what they're building now without a tool like ours, because they would have to either go hire a software developer or do this by hand, or hire someone else to kind of code certain portions of this work. But putting the power of the technology in the hands of the subject matter expert, which is exactly what you're doing with your website. You know, if you have to communicate to someone else what changes they need to make, that's going to take you a lot longer. You also have to pay them, which maybe you're willing to do, but maybe a lot of other people are not willing to do. So it really reduces the barrier to entry for creation of software. We often say we're democratizing software development. And I think that's what really all no-code technologies are doing.
Good. And it's really the way we're going to talk about what this SaaS business, which is subscription as a service, and that's how you've set this up. That's a way where almost everything is running now. And updating some of I was just trying to update one of my programs. You know, every time you update your system on your computer, it's like you have to update some of your programs. So, and they've gone to a SaaS system, and it's like, okay, I've bought this like 3 times. Why do I have to go to the system? So, you know, but that's the way, you know, even from, you know, Microsoft, everything, you have a yearly fee. So explain that and how you have set that up, because and I want to talk too, just briefly about where you're going from here and how you are developing, because I know you're continuing to develop this, but how you've set it up as a SaaS system, because this is very important for listeners to hear and the benefits of this.
Definitely. So I will say that it's interesting because from the experience of someone who worked at a law firm, I never really, at a law firm, you work on the billable hour. And that's all you know in terms of how to create revenue for your business.
Right.
And so the first time I ever heard about recurring revenue was when I left the law firm world and realized that every software company, as you're saying, has some kind of recurring revenue software as a service model. And so the reason that we set it up like that is because we're cloud-based. And so there are things that first of all, we're hosting everything for our customers. And there are lots of security aspects that we're constantly making sure of and keeping buttoned down for them. But also we're constantly developing and adding new features. So whereas previously, if you have on-premise or desktop software, you only get the updates every once in a while when they push them. Right. We're pushing out updates on a daily or weekly basis based on things that features client asks for, optimizations we're making. And so it allows you to provide a lot more of a seamless experience for your end user by having this model. And it really is where all the software companies are going.
They really are. Everything. I mean, I have now yearly, and you have to watch those. I always say you can be membership poor, and you can have too many. You got to evaluate that. Like every year I go through and think, okay, what haven't I used this year, or haven't I used as much? And, you know, where can I put my resources other places? And many of those that are very good, you know, my membership platform, my themes, all of that, I'm very happy with. I keep those, you know, of course. And anyway, and I always say, don't outgrow what you decide to start on. And this is really important. And I liked the fact that you are continuing to grow. And as your company continues to grow, that's where, you know, you feel like, okay, I won't eventually outgrow this, because we've all been there. I've outgrown some platforms, and it's very difficult to have to switch platforms then. It's just a
very much.
It's a total time sucker. So you've got to think about that, and you know, all of that sort of aspect of that. So what's next, Dorna, for your company with Documate? You're always doing these updates, but is there anything else new on the horizon, or what? You know, I know you're constantly looking with you know, you're working with developers, and even, you know, you've done some outside funding as well. Talk about that just briefly, and how you went about that, and then what you are looking to do in the future.
Yeah, definitely. So we bootstrapped our business for the first 2 years or so, and then we raised around venture funding about a little over a year ago now. And the reason that we did that was because we found that, you know, the way that we were going to be able to really scale and ramp up the speed at which we delivered new features and new services to our clients, and the speed at which we could actually market that to new customers, was greatly going to be helped by having a little bit of extra funding and being able to spend extra cash on that. So that was the reason that we did that. And then in terms of kind of what our roadmap is for the future, obviously we're always adding features on a consistent basis. Right now, our focus for this quarter is data. So being able to pull data from any system that you want into and out of our system, because then you could have a fully integrated system. We have a lot of legal aid organizations, but we also have a lot of for-profit law firms and, sales organizations and larger companies who are using multiple different software tools within their suite of products. Right. And as you said, you need to know that the softwares you pick are scalable. Yes. That is one aspect of being scalable is, do you play well with others, so to speak? And can you pass data back and forth so that you can have a seamless process? So that's what we're focused on right now. And then another thing that we're planning for probably later this year is launching more of a marketplace where, because a lot of our customers are building similar things. And we are seeing organically, we're seeing them communicate on social media channels, on our Slack channel, about just sharing work. And so what we want to do is provide a more centralized location for that, so that if you are an estate planning attorney in Oregon and you want some documents that you don't already have, you could find them because maybe one of our other attorneys has posted that onto our website. So we're planning on building that out and making better relationships between some of our customers as well.
That is so cool. So it's almost like a referral system, or that you can find a bank of those. And I don't know how you will vet some of those, or what that will be the process of that. But that's really a great idea. And I think it's if you can go to one place to where you can find somebody, because there are different attorneys. I was just asked in a meeting earlier, well, you have a son that can look at contracts. I said, oh no, he won't look at contracts. No. He's a tax attorney. He has told me flat out, I'm not looking at this.
That's what we always try to tell our parents. But my mom asked me for a property law advice for really, I don't know, every single area of the law other than the areas that I've actually specialized. I practiced for my mom, but only for my mom.
Yeah, I know. It's just pretty funny because the particular son, of course we have three sons, but this particular son, it's very black and white. It's always been that way with him. He's never had a hard time saying, nope, I don't do that. Definitely told me. So this has been delightful. How can people connect with you or find? I'll put the website, but tell us how people can find you and your company.
Yeah. So website is www.documate.org. I am on Twitter. Our company handle is @DocumateLaw. My personal is @Dorna Moini. And I'm also on pretty much all the other social media channels that you could think of. So you could find me on LinkedIn as well. There's not a lot of Dornas out there.
And you have a .org because you also serve nonprofits. Is that correct? Or
so that was the original thought, but .com is also taken by Xerox. So
I see. Yeah. It was interesting. I was looking up a website yesterday, and I noticed it was a co instead of com, because the com were like music drum heads, and the other co was exactly what I was looking for. Isn't that funny?
How funny! Yeah, the .coms are all gone. Now I think the .ios are the hot item right now.
Yes. Isn't that funny? Yeah. So, we just do what we need to do.
Exactly.
So, I hope people end up, connecting, and they find so much of just really interesting help here, because there is a whole need for many people to be able to have access to especially for information and what their rights are. And that's a very important process. And the paperwork can just drag you down. I mean, just drag you down. So this is such a great service. Any closing words for our audience to hear? Do you have any encouraging words, people, especially if seeking legal help?
Yeah. I mean, if anyone out there is thinking of starting a company or a SaaS company, there's really no better time than now.
Yes.
Everything has accelerated so much in terms of development, the ability to set up a server, even the ability to set up your website. You can do it all on your own from the comfort of your own home.
Yes.
So really just go do it. There are so many tools out there for you to use.
And that's a great segue, because I want to make sure everybody, is able to come to our next week as this comes out. Next week's podcast show is I will be talking about developing your intellectual property as an entrepreneur, creating your residual income. And I'm going to be talking about that specifically on what, some of the tools I've done from trademarks all the way through, and all of the resources available to us as entrepreneurs, or people that are they're running a little side business, whatever you're doing. So, but developing that intellectual property and how to do it is very important. So, well, this has been delightful. I hope everybody clicks in and looks for other episodes as well, shows at womenathalftime.com. You can always reach me, Deborah Johnson, anytime, and listen, subscribe, and even write a review. Love, love, love reviews. And so thank you all for being with. And again, Dorna, thank you for coming on today. This was an absolute delight to have you. And I really appreciate you taking your time, your very busy time, to be with me today. So
thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be on here, and I've been listening to a few of your past podcasts. So it's just a great podcast, and excited to be here along all the other wonderful guests.
Well, a pleasure having you, and I appreciate you being here, because I just love the topic. So I'm I always tell people, I definitely have my nerdy side, and I love the contract. I love all the SaaS, the computer, what's possible. It just shows you what's possible. So, well, thanks again. And thank you all for listening. And I will look forward to seeing you next time, or being with you next time. And bye for now. Thank you for joining us on Women at Halftime. Visit goalsforyourlife.com or womenathalftime.com for many more resources, downloads, and programs, or to get in touch with me. I'd love it if you leave me a review and tell your friends. So until next time, this is Deborah Johnson, signing off.